Welcome back to Exhibit A List, where pop culture gets cross examined. I'm your host, Jasmine Weg, and I break down the contracts, power dynamics, and the legal realities behind the stories everyone's watching and arguing about. Okay, real talk. I'm not a divorce attorney, as most of you know, but sometimes I end up hearing all about what people are going through when it comes to divorce. My DMs, my comments, emails. People are always asking me about divorce, and I think it's because it's an area where legal, financial, and emotional realities all collide at the same time, and people just don't know where to start. So today, I wanted to bring on someone who is in it every single day, working with people in that exact moment when everything is shifting. My guest is Olivia Howell. Welcome. She is a divorce educator, the founder of Fresh Starts Registry, and someone who works closely with people who are navigating what is honestly probably one of the hardest transitions in life. Olivia, welcome to Exhibit A List.
Thank you, Jasmine. I'm psyched to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. I'm so excited to hear your answers to all the divorce questions that everyone has and probably are a little bit scared or shy to ask. So, let's just dive in if you're ready.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, I want to start here because I think that what people are really wondering is what is the moment where someone knows that their marriage is over? And do most people already know and they haven't said it out loud? Or is it something that just happens suddenly?
This is such a great question. And it's so funny because today is 7 years since my marriage ended. So you
Oh,
are keeping me, it's a good anniversary. Um, so there's two answers to this, Jasmine. That one answer is kind of you already answered your own question, which is the average woman contemplates divorce for 2 years before she even says anything to anybody. We're talking her therapist, her best friend, her sister. Now, she may not know she's contemplating divorce. It can be that kind of like little tickle in the back of her brain that's just like, this is not the life that I thought I was going to have or that I planned out. But eventually it kind of snowballs into that question of like, should I ask for a divorce? Should we discuss divorce? Or even, should we go to counseling and see what's going on in our relationship? So that's definitely one way that a lot of women will consider divorce. Then you have people like my own story that it kind of came out of the blue. It was like, we had a fight. It was one of those days and then it was over. Right. So, not that it was perfect by any means before that, but, sometimes, your partner will serve you with papers and shock you. I hear that story a lot. Right. Or you'll decide because something maybe escalated in your relationship that was infidelity or abuse or toxic something, right? That you just are done. You need to get out. So
mhm.
I think it really comes kind of both ways. I talk to women every day and I hear every different story possible. I always say like every marriage is different, every divorce is different also. And it really depends on who you are in the relationship. But there is a lot of contemplation that goes into it for the most part, which is why when culturally, right, when we kind of shame people who are considering divorce, the amount of thought process that goes into the divorce is way more than people realize.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it's something that you really probably dismiss a bunch of times in the back of your head before you ever give it that real consideration too. But one of the things that struck me is because you were talking about women making that move, and I know your area is focused on women, but it reminded me of this saying I hear a lot is that women will leave and men will stay, and even that women will have affairs to get out of their marriage and men will have it to stay. In other words, just because they need to fulfill whatever it is so that they can stay with their wives, that it's so rare for men to pick up and go. What are your thoughts about that?
I think gender dynamics play obviously a huge part in all marriages. And it's something that, I've seen a lot of people, especially when you get married young,
Mhm.
you are not the same person you are when you're 22 as when you're 42. Some couples will have that come to Jesus moment and it's not working and they will figure it out, right? We have fair play cards. We have, things we can read and work on. some people, it's never going to work that way, right? And so the majority of women I talk to are the ones who are taking on all of the domestic, labor and the child care and doing everything. Often they're the breadwinner too, and their spouse, typically in a heterosexual relationship, is not fulfilling their kind of like partnership in that way. And so there's a lot of women that I talk to who almost wish that their partner did something worse to let them out of the marriage, right? So to say, like, I almost wish that they had an affair because it would give me a reason to say that they were not good to me, because it's very hard to explain to people, like, he's fine. He just doesn't do anything, right? So, and the other part of that too is there's the 70% of divorces are filed by women. A lot of people take that statistic and think that it's about women wanting to leave more, but a lot of that is that women do the paperwork to get the file done. So it's not as wild as you think it is.
I've heard people say that, my husband would never cheat on me because he wouldn't have the wherewithal to do all the planning
100%. Yep.
execution, which is funny because you're saying, like, a lot of times it's a woman because it takes so much follow through and it is so hard. From the legal side, it is incredibly difficult and as well as expensive to go through a divorce. But what you said, I want to touch upon that was so interesting is that it it sometimes is the little things, but these little things become so huge, like the dynamics in the household, the share of who's doing what, and then the added pressure to make a living and all those things. And if the man is not stepping up, sometimes they leave, but they wish there was a stronger reason. And it reminded me of growing up. I live in a more I'm an Orthodox Jew, modern Orthodox, but we're kind of a more traditional culture. And now divorce is not as stigmatized. I think over the years it's less and less. But I've heard people say over the years, if he's not cheating or abusing you, then it's not that bad and you just stay. And that was really eye-opening to think about that. Most marriages are actually ending and people don't have those massive breakdowns of cheating or abuse where it's really just a day to day because that's what we're living day to day. All
Yeah.
these big things that stress us out are homework and kids and driving and that really makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Yeah, I think if you don't have a partner when you thought you were going to have a partner, and this goes both directions, this goes for all types of marriages. Um, it's really disappointing, right? And when you talk to them about it, if they don't make those changes, you're kind of stuck in trying to figure out what's going to come next.
And what does make people stay or feel stuck versus the person who's motivated to divorce?
Finances are number one. So, there's a lot of financial abuse in a lot of marriages, meaning that a lot of women I talk to maybe don't have an income that would support them, for them to pay for a divorce lawyer or to go through the process, or, buy out their spouse from the house or things like that. But unfortunately, there's also a lot of women who don't have access to the bank accounts or to the funds. And they are stuck in this place where they know that if they leave, they may not have money, at least for a long time. And then if they stay, it's just destroying their soul. Right. So finances are a big part. And also, there is a strategy for a lot of this stuff. So, if we're talking about somebody in maybe a toxic relationship or an emotionally abusive relationship, they can't just leave, right? There's the kids maybe they have to think about, or pets a lot of people think about, the house, any shared things that you have. So, I think that there is a lot of feelings of being stuck, which is why I always recommend working with experts to help you kind of figure out a plan and educate you.
That makes a lot of sense, especially the financial piece. I do know some women who are very hands off when it comes to how things are done. And even when you're not thinking about divorce, if God forbid there is a sudden death, you can be in such a dangerous position if you don't know how to access your financial accounts. Is this something that you would advise a woman if she's not even thinking about divorce, but maybe to familiarize herself with her finances just in general because it's maybe makes for a happier marriage without thinking about divorce?
Yeah, I think that, we don't necessarily need to think about divorce when we think about education, about our finances or real estate or our future, right? What we want for our future. I think that that is all something that every woman should think about on her own. I certainly did not, I will be honest, but I will say to any young woman, you should know how much money you have. Where is it going? Right? What's coming in? And when you start to date somebody, it's not necessarily what they're saying to you, right? They can say anything they want to you, but be really observant, right? What are they spending their time and money on? Right? What's important for them to make a big investment into, right? And because that's they're probably not going to change from that, right? So, I think it's important to not just have the conversations, but to really observe who you're dating and where they spend their time. What do they say? How do they respond when you say something like, "Oh, I wouldn't spend money on that concert myself, but, go ahead, you can." Do they come back at you with anger? Do they understand, right? So, I'm all about education. My background, actually, I was a middle school teacher for my first career, and I really find that there's zero divorce education, which is why we're so passionate about it. But there's nothing wrong with educating yourself about how the divorce process works or finances, especially in your state, because every state is different. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean you're going to get divorced. It just means that it's important to know because the truth of the matter is at least 50% of first marriages end in divorce.
Wow, 50%, is that the
It's
current
about
st
40, but it hovers between 40 and 50%. Yeah. And it goes up for second and third marriages.
Wow. So you're even less likely to succeed on a second or third marriage.
Yeah.
What do you think that is because of?
Well, I think a lot of people don't take time after their divorce to heal. And I think we as a culture have not given divorce enough credit for really blowing up every aspect of your life. So we think we often just associate it with legal, right, or financial, but your entire identity, your soul is completely shifted, right? Your parenting, your sexuality, and you do need to take time to heal. And if you don't look at yourself and the patterns that, listen, there's two people in every marriage. You brought something into that, right? I know for myself, I was a codependent people pleaser, eldest daughter, eldest granddaughter, right? So for me, I had to make everybody happy and I had to cater towards everybody to my own detriment, right? I knew I did not want to do that again, but that took me a long time to figure out and heal that process. If you don't do that, you're going to walk right into the same situation again.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. So let's say someone is sitting there and they're at that point where they're saying, I think I want a divorce. What would you say as an expert is first step? What do you go? What do you do?
First up is come talk to me. So, part of our business model is that I offer completely free 15-minute consultations with
Wow.
anybody who is considering divorce in the middle or post. So, if divorce is in your world somehow and you need support, we're here to help you. I am a certified life coach and certified divorce coach, though I do not coach in those realms, but I did want to make sure I could hold the space for people, and you can sign up. None of the information that we put out there says divorce consult. It just says fresh start consult. And I will talk to you on Zoom. I'll hear what's going on. I talk to men and women. For a lot of people, I am the first person that they tell that they are considering divorce. And I will then say, great, we have tons of resources. We have free ebooks. We have 99% of our experts have free consultations, tons and tons of support, and start educating yourself, right? Start educating yourself on financials, going through all of that, what the state laws are, things like that. But I always say, come talk to me first. I will take the overwhelm out of it and I will tell you exactly what the next steps are.
So it sounds like it's important once you've made a decision, before you really do anything is education because
Education.
there's a lot more to a divorce and it's a long road ahead that a person really needs to understand what they're looking at before they start to go ahead and file something or retain an attorney or right? Like that would be premature if you don't even know what a divorce entails.
100% Jasmine. And so actually, I always say divorce lawyer, divorce attorney is actually the last stop on the divorce train for me because you need to find out what you want from your divorce. What is your strategy? What's going on with your financials? What's happening with the real estate and the mortgage? What are your state laws? Things like that. Your lawyer is going to cover a lot of things, but they're not going to do a deep dive into your financials. They're not going to look at necessarily the deep dive into the parenting plan a way that a co parenting expert might. So, obviously, if safety is on the line, you can go and get, the restraining order, all of those orders. But if you're just contemplating divorce, I would say first stop is always a divorce coach. And then let's get somebody to look at your financials, a certified divorce financial analyst. If you own a house, I absolutely want you to talk to a mortgage expert and a real estate expert who know divorce. And we build your hype team that way. And then you can have them in your back pocket, which is going to change the game for you.
Now, if a person is building that hype team, do they advise the spouse or is this done secretively?
That's a great question, Jasmine. Um, it's not secretively. I mean, unless you really are not telling your spouse yet, right? So I definitely talk to women who have not told their spouse yet, in which case I will hook them up with a divorce coach who will help them with scripts, right, for that conversation. Where should you have that conversation? When should you have that conversation? We always recommend therapy, right? We're big fans of therapy,
Group
but
therapy or individual or
anything. I love group that we have amazing group therapists who specialize in divorce, individual. If you already have a therapist, wonderful. But planning for that conversation, if you have had that conversation and you are ready to move on, you can still build that team. You can talk to mortgage experts and real estate experts without your spouse knowing also.
that's smart. And you said that they'll give scripts. Can you just give me
Yeah.
like a little teaser of like what a script would look like? An example of how someone would approach their spouse with something so monumental like this?
Yeah, I mean, it really can be as simple as, first of all, doing it in a safe space that you feel safe, not with the kids around, right? Not before work, things like that. But saying something as simple as like, as you know, I've been in therapy for a while. I've been doing a lot of thinking and I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but I am ready for a divorce. And I know you're probably going to be really angry with me, and that's fine. But I just wanted to tell you what I'm thinking. I'm not going to change my mind. So I'm going to give you some space to process that. And then we can talk about this later.
That's such a thoughtful way to approach it. I wonder, do you see a lot of women who I would imagine it ends up just coming out because it's such an emotional thing. Do people end up saying it in the wrong way very often? I don't know, like you're frustrated in the moment. You know what? I want a divorce,
Yeah.
like that.
I think that there's a lot of back and forth a lot, right? So I'll talk to a lot of women that are like, "Oh, we talked about divorce and then we didn't do it. And then we talked about it again." And then a lot of times one spouse will bring it up and the other spouse will kind of ignore it, right? So it's
Mm.
really important to be very clear about your boundaries. And this is why I recommend working with an expert in this way to have that conversation ready. We have scripts in one of our free ebooks. We actually wrote a whole book called How to Get Divorced as a Stay at Home Parent because I was talking to so many stay at home parents. And in that book, we have very clear scripts. And also, it lays out like what to say if they start to cry, if they start to get angry, right? Things like that.
Mm.
Um, but also remembering that this is not just going to be, and same thing for talking to your kids. This is not a one conversation and it's done deal, right? This is an opening to that portal. And then you're going to keep having conversations about it.
And is there an average of how many years people are married before that they go ahead and talk divorce meaningfully?
So there's a couple different, I guess, theories on this. There's a couple that you kind of see a jump at the 2 year mark. And then that 7 year itch is still really a thing. I was about a 7 year marriage. And then you also see people now gray divorce is tripled in the last like 10 years, which is anybody over 50. So I do see a lot of people who've been married for 30 years and they are just done. And again, sometimes it's amicable and they're ready to just move on. And sometimes it's like they've been waiting a long time. But, you tend to see also when you have kids who are like maybe in elementary school, high school, like a lot of the kind of big graduations, people tend to,
Mm.
kind of splinter off there.
Changing,
Yeah.
maybe it's time for a change for us, or like maybe this is a good
Right.
transition period. Um, I hear so many times when people talk about their divorce while they're in it, it sounds so ugly and cruel. from both sides, and especially, like, I can look at it from the outside. I wonder, especially because I've had friends or people I know where their marriage didn't seem to have those elements. What about the process could bring that out in people and make them be so cruel toward each other or vindictive or fight so hard?
That is a great question, and I don't know if you're gonna like my answer, but the person that you see during the divorce is the person that they were during the marriage. You just didn't know that. And so a lot of people do a really great job at, suppressing a lot of anger and resentment and masking a lot of that, and then it just comes out during the divorce. And so, I often say you don't divorce the person you married. You just don't. And that's pretty true across the board. You will get the occasional really amicable divorce, right? Where people are like, we love each other. This just isn't working. That's
Right.
great. Even those divorces are tricky, right? But often what happens is when you bring up things like custody and finances and the house and the future and decision making, it brings out the worst in people.
Is it a power struggle?
100%. It's a power struggle. It's a control, right? It's a power dynamic. It's, who knows the kids better, who was making more money, who was putting more time into the ice skating lessons with the kids, right? Little things like that. It's very, nitpicky type of things. But also remember, like, this is somebody you shared your life with. And so there is a heartbreak and a devastation. And on top of that, you're kind of having to literally inventory everything that you have in your life. And that's really hard to do.
And if someone is interested in having a salvageable or good relationship after divorce, what could they do during the divorce? Especially if children are involved, what could they do during the divorce process to achieve that?
I love this question. There are ways you can do this. So it's really hard to put yourself aside and your ego aside when you are divorcing the person you thought you were going to spend the rest of your life with. We have amazing co parenting specialists. I was just talking to one on our podcast the other day, and she was saying when you put kids in the center of a divorce, not the middle, but the center, you really can't go wrong because everybody will focus on the kids and take your ego out of it. So I would say if you and your spouse are both devoted parents and you're ready to do this and not traumatize the kids, because it's not divorce that hurts kids, it's the parents that don't do it in the way that they know that they can do it because nobody knows this stuff. Co-parenting experts, um, therapists, family therapists, just use them. They're there for that. And there's so many skills that you can learn for communication, for keeping kind of the family intact, even when you're in two houses.
And I think sometimes after the divorce is final and there's already an agreement in place, sometimes people are very frustrated with the former spouse that they're dealing with, the ex, because they're dealing with them in terms of, let's say, child support or custody and drop offs and things like that. And I think a lot of conflict happens then too. And it happens on both sides between the men and the women. How do you navigate that without the child feeling like they're getting the brunt of the disagreement between the 2?
It's such a good question. I come from a family of divorce, so I've seen this on all sides. Um, all of my grandparents are divorced, and my parents were divorced, and so I think again leaning into the professionals. There are some fantastic people who their job is to help you learn to communicate with your ex. There are whether it's a divorce coach or co-parenting coach, a specialist, people that literally, there's a lot of mediators that also specialize in parenting plans and communication. It's really just a matter of learning how to be in a relationship with this person in a new way. And that's really hard for people.
Yeah, and I guess if you didn't learn the best way to be in a relationship with the person while you are married, now it's even trickier in
Bingo. Yeah.
a situation. But, and that's the challenge of this life is always learning. Uh,
Yes.
Speaking to financials, if you can, could you give me an average of what a divorce would cost so that people can get an idea of what one can expect?
Well, this is a big range. So, we have in some states you can go file yourself, right, for a couple $100. Then I always recommend trying mediation if you can, if you feel safe enough. And, even if you don't get along, you can still do mediation. You can do mediation through lawyers, right? There's lots of ways to do this without going to court.
Can you explain what mediation is for
Yes,
divorce?
sure. So mediation is when you both have a neutral party who's a mediator who helps you develop a plan or a stipulation for your divorce together. You can do it on Zoom. I did mine on Zoom. You can do this. Usually, it's a package you get of sessions, and the mediator will sit with you and go over every question. They're unbiased, and they'll just help you figure out a divorce plan. Then typically you have a lawyer who will review that. And then you'll submit it to the state to get filed for divorce.
And that is
That,
a quickly legally binding
yep,
route that doesn't involve battling in court for 3
100%. And you can, like I said, like my mediation, we had a mediator. It was a little bit contentious between us. So we each had our own lawyers. The
Mhm.
lawyers hashed it out, not in court. They just went back and forth. I would talk to mine, he would talk to his, they talked to each other. And that was about $15,000. I'm in New York. So, and that was from mediation. We have mediators that do a package starting at, let's say, $2,500, right? Or maybe it's like, 350 an hour or something like that. It's really not bad. That's, lawyers obviously are going to be more money. Lawyers start at 450 an hour, go up in New York here to 950 an hour, right? So it's a lot of money.
I've heard of
I,
paying 35 to 70 to over 100K in attorney's fees
yeah, yeah.
on
I
top of
mean,
the other costs that we were talking about, now you have a separate home to pay for and all that.
yeah.
It's that be astronomical, right?
It is, and I've talked to people, and especially if it's a high net worth family, I've talked to a lot of people, especially here in New York, who are high net worth families. $100,000 retainer is a good month for them. Like that's, yeah. So we're talking about millions of dollars could be spent on the divorce. Especially if there's finances involved, real estate involved, a lot of custody stuff involved. So
I
it
had someone
can be arranged.
time and she was being sued by her former divorce attorney, so I helped her in the civil case because of attorney's fees, and she told me that her attorney had said to her, just like you're saying with high net worth, she realized that the ex-husband made a lot of money and she did pretty okay, but she was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and she told her, "I'm going to take almost everything you're gonna get." And she told her that point blank. I was shocked because it's such a different way of practice. I couldn't even imagine thinking about that. Like,
Yeah.
my goal was to keep my clients' money in their pockets, but, whatever, that's another story,
It's a
but
very different world for sure. And this is why I do recommend divorce coaches because they will help you strategize what you want before you get to the lawyer's office and they'll help you respond to the lawyer's team. They will help you, respond to your ex. So you're not the one calling your lawyer and getting billed for 15 minutes, right?
yeah.
For crying on the phone with this is my own story. Right? My lawyer was like, call me back when you can calm down. Right. So I wish I'd had a coach that I could call because coaches are significantly cheaper than a lawyer and you get a package with them and then they're like your on-call divorce best friend that will help you through this.
People don't realize, I had someone come to me and she was like, "Can you review my invoices with my divorce attorney?" She didn't realize that every time she texted him, he was billing her in a 6-minute increment, and she was texting a lot. And people don't realize how quickly, you reach out to your attorney. Sometimes people can get a therapy feel from talking to their attorney because it's confidential,
Yeah,
you can promote, but it's so costly, and I don't think that it's always so clear to them, especially
it's
the
not.
fog of the divorce makes probably that initial intake with your attorney like a blur, I'm sure, because
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
why do most people start with mediation? It's so much more cost effective. Why is everyone lawyering up right away?
So a lot of people still don't know about mediation. Like a lot of people don't know about mediation and they don't know that there's collaborative divorce, which is another type of divorce that's kind of more modern, which is working with like a team to kind of help you get and your partner get divorced. I think a lot of people either see it as like litigation, like going to court. Only a very small percentage of people actually go to court and divorce.
Mhm.
Most people are doing it either through lawyers, like in mediation, or with a mediator, or doing a lot of the paperwork themselves and then having a lawyer look over it too. I'm a huge fan of mediation. I think there's and mediation you can work with a mediator anywhere, so you can really find one that you fit, the right vibes with you and your partner. And it's just a fantastic option, but a lot of people just don't know about it.
I've heard people talk about this sense of an element of surprise. So sometimes when they once divorce is basically understood between them, like this race to find a lawyer first and maybe serve the person first and do things in a more shocking means, and maybe they're doing certain things behind the scenes when it comes to preparing themselves. Is there, can you speak to that?
I think a lot of this comes from, like you said before, people who are looking to be cruel a little bit, right? And looking to rock the boat. The most important thing is that, nothing is going to get hidden in divorce because even in the discovery process, they're going to find your finances, they're going to look at your real estate and all of these things. But to educate yourself, even if somebody files and you feel like you're under the wire, call a divorce coach, get in touch with us. We will hook you up with somebody so that you feel a little bit more educated, so you're not so taken off guard. I would say don't respond until you talk to somebody that is a professional. But often the reason that people do that is really just to throw people off their game and to scare them.
So it's a scare tactic.
Mhm.
Back to the financial, what would you say is like the biggest financial mistake people make early on in divorce?
I'd say going right to a lawyer and signing a contract for a big retainer when you may not need it, right? And or you may switch lawyers, or you may have to get something else that you need, right? So, before you jump into that, take a second, pause and see what you really need out of the situation.
That's a good point because sometimes people do a huge retainer, not even just in divorce, but that will make them feel like they're already stuck with this attorney. So what am I going to do? Even though I don't know how it works in divorce, but I would imagine you should be able to get money back if you haven't
Yeah.
been in for all of it. But people do feel stuck. Oh, I already paid this person, so this is the route I'm going, and makes
Yeah.
sense before you get too deep in. Think about it.
100%.
What do people get wrong about divorce emotionally, though?
I think that people don't realize how much it really impacts your entire existence. Like, your identity is completely shaken up by divorce. It is the second most traumatic life experience that adults go through next to the loss of their spouse for by death. And it really is a death and it is a loss and you do have to grieve and people don't give themselves time to do any of that. But I think people come into this thinking it's legal, it's financial, right? We're going to get custody and all these things, but you have to take care of yourself during divorce also and have to learn how to heal through the process and beyond.
And how long does an average divorce take?
There's really no answer to that. I think it really depends. You have some divorces that take that are quick, depends on the state, depends on how many financial aspects there are or kids, and some take years. Some can take years.
Yeah, I definitely hear people
Yeah.
talk about divorces that are going on for ages.
And
But
yeah,
what about feeling like yourself again? How long does that take? Is that something that people can feel during the course of the divorce? Is that something that people start to feel once it's like, okay, it's final, I'm myself again, or is this a way longer process than people even realize?
I think it is a process, but it can begin as early as just saying what's on your mind and freeing yourself from that burden, right? I mean, I know I first felt like myself when my ex moved out and I had the house to myself and the kids and I could like finally start the grieving process a little bit. We have people that wait until they're signed the papers, but a lot of people also came to the table knowing that they were not in a happy marriage, and so they started the process before that.
And do you have suggestions, of how someone can get back to feeling like themselves? If yeah, I guess it's very general because everyone's different.
Yes, the number one suggestion, and this sounds so silly, but go listen to the music you listened to when you were a teenager.
Oh, I love
It's
that.
going to light you up inside. It's going to make you feel like yourself again and start walking. Take care of yourself. Drink water and art. I'm a huge fan of using art to start the healing process, crafting, art, watercolors, whatever you can do to literally bring the color back into your world. Because it really is a devastating process, but it doesn't have to be forever. But you deserve the time to really like consider yourself as somebody to take care of.
Do you ever see people who are just like, I guess, super happy through it all? Because like if they were unhappy or they're so excited to be single, and then the dating field and dating market again? Do you ever see
I
that
do.
part?
I mean, I do. Like I said, I think a lot of women come already having grieved a lot of the relationship, and so they're ready to move on. Not that divorce is fun, right? The legal process is really hard and excruciating, but they are really ready for the next part of their life. And yeah, and it's a beautiful thing to walk through and to see, I'm obviously biased, but I feel like divorce for a lot of people is the plan that they were supposed to have. That's who they were supposed to be, and they just didn't know that.
I know you work with women, but from a male perspective, I wonder if there is too much pressure on men to take care of everything that might lead to these breakdowns, even if they're not the one leaving, but maybe the relationship is souring sometimes because it can be a lot. The financial responsibility, if they are the breadwinner, and that can be a lot. And I think sometimes, like we were talking about women not always being involved in the finances. And I think there's a flip side is like, maybe they don't realize how much they're spending can take a toll, a silent toll that could be weighing on the man who's maybe not talking to them. Do you see that?
I think that overall we really lack giving men, and I say this as a mom of boys, giving men the communication skills, right, and the leniency to be themselves, right, and to open up and be emotional and say what's on their mind. And that's really hard to do as a grown-up man that if you've never done that as a kid, right?
Mm.
So really starting to think about raising our next generation of sons to speak their mind in terms of their emotions and what's bothering them in a positive way, right? And in a way that you can work with a partner to figure out what's happening in that relationship. A lot of men just really don't have the skill set to do that. And that can be like the downfall to all of the things that you were talking about.
And I think like we're lucky that things are changing in that way because everywhere you go, people are talking about their feelings. And so it's like exposure therapy. The more you see people
Yes.
doing it and
Yeah.
every okay. I know for me personally, the more I saw people being honest about their trauma made me feel comfortable talking
Yep.
about it. So I think it's a net gain for all of us.
I agree.
But I wanted to shift and do some kind of real life situations. I got some questions from all over, and maybe you can answer some of these. So let's say someone just decided they want a divorce. What should they not do in the first 30 days?
I wouldn't go post about your ex on social media.
Good one.
Yeah, your social media can be subpoenaed and it can be used against you. And so just choose a couple of very close friends to talk about it with, and you don't need to go blast it on social media.
Are people doing that a lot? Right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Remember, people when everyone used Facebook a lot, it was the relationship. I remember as teenagers,
Yep.
5 minutes after you broke up, you went on Facebook and you said you're single again.
I mean, it's my number one thing I tell my girlfriends. Like, please don't, and they don't listen to me, but I tell them not to do it. So,
There's also this element on on social media where you can be passive aggressive. So, like, if you want
mhm.
something, you can just post something that's like, it says your message without you saying it,
Yeah,
and
it's
then
like the away messages. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so how do you co-parent with someone that you can't stand? Which has got to be a case for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really hard. I'm gonna just be honest, it's really hard. Again, use those professionals and give yourself grace and boundaries. You have to have boundaries. And that takes time with you going to therapy and you finding your self-worth to be able to uphold those boundaries.
And I know you said lawyer you call last. So my question was like therapy, lawyer, coach, who do you call first? So you'd say lawyer last, so coach or therapist.
I would say therapist, then divorce coach, then I would start calling around lawyers and see, who understands your story. There are some lawyers that will handle certain cases better than other lawyers, and utilize the divorce coach to help you find a lawyer that really fits your team. This is a team process. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. You're going to have a real estate expert. You're going to have a mortgage person, financial analyst, right? So build that team around you, and then you will be successful in whatever your outcome is because you'll have the support.
I love the idea of having a team because it makes you feel like you're not alone in a
Yeah.
very situation. A question I get a lot is I need a lawyer who's a real shark. And I always hate that phrase because personally, people have used it against me. They're like, "Oh, you're not a shark." And I'm always like, "Are you sure you want a shark?" Because sharks usually are nasty and don't have a good rapport with opposing counsel. So they usually make cases take way
Yeah.
longer, don't end up getting good settlements. Like, I'm very good at settling cases because I
Yep.
usually can build a good rapport. What do you think of that? People wanting a shark?
I think that it's really culturally kind of something we've been telling people. But again, the most important thing is to find a lawyer who understands what you want from the divorce and what you've been through. Whether that you are a stay at home parent, whether there was emotional abuse, whether there was financial abuse, whatever it was, you're not going to get any outcome that you want if the lawyer isn't listening to you and respects you and takes your story into consideration.
How do you know when you found a lawyer who is a good match in that sense or is really not understanding your situation or listening to you?
Your gut. Your gut. You're gonna have to say, like, do they hear me? Do I feel safe telling my lawyer certain things? Are they judging me? I mean, I've had people come to me and say, my lawyer judged me for being a stay-at-home parent, right? Like things like that. Whereas like with my lawyer, I felt comfortable telling her everything, and so you just need to feel safe with your lawyer.
And do you think it's a good idea if people try to do as much as they can to save to keep costs down by, let's say, they can sit and write everything out themselves and then send a very detailed email to their lawyer where the lawyer won't then have to this might be a summary of what's going
Yeah.
on or financials and stuff. Should people try and take on some of the legal work to save costs, or is that too much at this
It's
time?
it's a great question. I wouldn't say that's necessarily legal work, but you do provide your lawyer and your legal team with as much information as possible, right? So when you show up, have your wedding information, have your birth certificates, have your passports, whatever they're going to need, right? To kind of all of that. Yeah, all of your documents, right? And so, the mortgage papers, just so that they're not then calling you, the lawyer's assistant is not going to call you 100 times a day. Now we need this, now we need this. We have tons of resources about that. You can, it's all over the internet. Like, what do I need to show up with my first divorce, session? We have a whole free ebook on the website called 250 Questions to Ask Divorce Professionals before you even hire them. You're interviewing them because you need to know that they're going to work for you.
That is such a good point. I think that you are interviewing them, and so often we forget, like, even when we're doing a job interview, we forget that we have to see if we want it. It's not only if they're going to take our case, if this lawyer is going to tell me he's going to win, is like, do I like him or her? Are
Hmm.
they what I want? So that's a great point. I have had people tell me about their divorce and they're already in the legal process and they'll send me things just to look at as a friend. Probably shouldn't be doing all this, but I see a lot of people, they're lying to me, but not intentionally because they're giving me stuff. And I feel like it's this phenomenon in divorce. Like people they think they're spending more or making way more than is there. They say, um, just things that aren't true, and I'm like, are people a little bit delusional during divorces? I know I also always say that there's, like, 3 sides to every story when it comes to divorce, his, hers, and the truth. I don't think it's intentional. I really feel like people believe it. Because what do you think?
I don't think that they're lying. I agree with you. I think that people just don't always know. They just don't look at their finances so deeply. But again, when you go through the discovery process in a divorce and your paperwork is all looked, they look through the bank accounts and all that, there's no hiding at that point. So I think people just don't know. And that you don't check your financial statements as much as you should and you assume things. But I think a lot of people would probably say that. And then,
Mm,
it gets looked through.
yeah. No, it makes sense. And I know you said earlier that a lot of divorces were caused by just this unequal distribution in the home. But let's talk about cheating because, like, we hear about it all the time. How many of divorces are really ending with that, and who's doing it, and why?
I mean, I don't have data, but I do know from just talking to hundreds of people, it happens. It happens a lot. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's the traditional cheating infidelity. It's things like financial infidelity, that they go and buy a car and don't tell you, or that they're having an emotional relationship with somebody online. There's a lot of porn addiction out there. There's a lot of people who are spending money to do things on the internet. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of different infidelities happening across the board. I would say in the majority of the women that I talk to, there's is some sort of infidelity or abuse or neglect happening in some capacity.
I've heard a lot of talk about sex addiction and how often is that the cause of a divorce or
It definitely happens. It's out there for sure. And I think, again, it's one of those things that you don't necessarily know is going to come up in your marriage until you are married to that person. And people change, people evolve over the years and not necessarily for the better. But there's also a lot of alcohol addiction, there's a lot of drug addiction. Addiction plays a big role in a lot of divorces for sure.
that makes sense because addiction is definitely going to change people. So
Yeah.
for sure going to change that relationship. What is the bad advice people are receiving regarding divorce?
I think it's really important to remember that every divorce is different. And so, even if your parents got divorced, even if your sister got divorced, their divorce is going to be different than your divorce. And so, you can't always just take other people's advice about their divorce or what they did or what they would have done because your situation is going to be unique. And so, that's why it's great to build a team that can support you in your divorce because everybody thinks that they know everything and that they want to say everything and help you, but it's not really helping you.
Yeah, so, like, just generally, like, when you're going through something, getting too much advice from other people because just because 'cause they've been through this big D word
Yeah.
divorce, it's a massive category. The fact that they can tell you about their experience doesn't really necessarily give you any advice for your own life. That's
100%.
really good advice. From your perspective, what do lawyers get wrong sometimes in a divorce?
I think lawyers are just so used to doing their job that they sometimes take time to see because the intricacies of little things. But that's again not always their job, right? Like lawyers, they want you to get the fair settlement, but they're not going to necessarily look at every single little minutia with finances or with custody stuff. So they are used to doing this. This is what they do every day. And that's why I love to say have another part of the support team because your lawyer is not there to be your therapist.
And what you offer, it sounds amazing. I'm wondering if someone is thinking divorce, will they think, "Oh, I don't have the money to allocate to all this preliminary help," like not knowing what it might cost? What should a person do? Like if they're in a maybe they are the stay-at-home spouse,
Yeah.
finances are strained. How would they go about working with professionals before going forward?
Again, talking to me is the first step because it's no obligation, totally free. And then we have so many free resources. So I will hook you up with free financial planning, free ebooks. We have all of our events are free, things like that. And then I will connect you to our experts for a free consultation. And I do recommend talking to the experts for a free consultation because every expert has different packages, different services. We have divorce coaches who have a amazing drop in divorce group coaching. It's virtual. It's like $30 a session. You can still get support. So there's such a range of support. So even if you can't afford it at that moment, look into the support and see what they have to offer.
That's such good advice, especially if there's so much free resources that
So
are
much.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm. I'm sure a lot of people don't even realize it
No.
because they're just thinking, wow, this is already going to cost me so much. What would you say that you've learned personally through divorce that you would impart to other people? And what would you say that you have learned in your professional capacity working with people going through divorce that you now can impart with people who maybe are embarking on a
I love
divorce?
this question. I think personally, I learned that I'm just much stronger than I ever thought that I was. And
Um,
yeah, and that was really awesome. And then I think professionally, I I grew up in a world of divorce, so for me, it wasn't a stigma or shamed, but it really is still very shamed in our society. And I talk to women and men every single day, thousands a year, that still come to me and say, "My mom shamed me, my neighbor shamed me. I'm afraid to talk about my divorce." And it's still a scarlet letter. And it's 2026. And I think I was a little bit surprised by that. And so that's why we're working so hard to change that narrative.
mm. When you hear someone say to you, I'm gonna stay for the kids until the kids are grown, or I don't want to do this for the kids, I'd assume that that means that they're probably not in any danger situation. It's probably not a situation of abuse, most likely.
Yeah.
Like, but what do you say to that? Is there validity to making that decision?
It really depends on the situation. So I never shame anybody, obviously, for whatever decision they're going to make. I will say, if you can leave, leave because you deserve a happy and healthy and peaceful life. But also, if you need to stay because it's safer for you and the kids to stay, then that's okay too. And while you're staying, educate yourself and start to like build that team around you. Even if you don't use them for 5 years, it's still good to have them there.
That's such a good advice. And just as a closing question, what general advice would you give someone who may be getting divorced in the future, looking toward what their future will look like? What would you give them?
Divorce is the best thing that's ever going to happen to you. The process itself sucks. Any legal process sucks, right? And you're going through legal shit, it's going to suck. But
Yeah.
divorce is the thing that is going to crack open your life. And it's also going to help you become the person you were always supposed to be.
Wow, what a positive perspective on something that could be really, really challenging. That was so helpful. I really feel like this is going to be super helpful and educational and a good start for anyone who's got a lot of questions. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and about what you're doing and where the websites and everything?
Absolutely. You can go to freshstartsregistry.com. We are the first and the world's only divorce registry. So you can get all the items you need for rebuilding your life again. And we're the premier support network for divorce professionals. So we have over 150 divorce professionals. And if you are a divorce professional, you can come join us. We have a membership that's either $25 or $55 a month. So very affordable. And we give referrals, we have business coaching, we have events, all sorts of great stuff. And if you would like to come chat with me, you can message me at Olivia Howell on Instagram or send me an email. It's Olivia at freshstartsregistry.com.
Amazing. I'll put all of that in the show notes. You're listening at home, I want you to know that there clearly is hope. There's amazing professionals out there that you can seek to get help, and life doesn't end when you're going through something like this. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today.